You knew it would happen. You just didn't care. How can you live with that?
We followed all protocols, Miss Alara. This was an unforeseeable tragedy.
Minneapolis Blizzard Gala. CEO Rowan Sterling sees a boy sing. Then a split brass snowflake pendant matches his. Could the child be his son? The North Star Pavilion gleamed like a lantern in the Minneapolis blizzard, every pane of glass trembling under wind that felt almost alive. Inside, the city's elite gathered under chandeliers shaped like frozen constellations. Photographers swirled around tuxedos and sequined gowns, but the center of it all was Rowan Sterling, founder and CEO of Vantage Mind, the AI company that claimed to predict winter hazards before they struck. He looked every inch the man the headlines promised. Late 30s, tall and fit, his Italian suit pressed to perfection, his blue eyes sharp even behind his minimalist glasses. His voice, smooth and confident, filled the hall as he welcomed guests to the Blizzard Relief Gala, a fundraiser designed to protect low-income families during sub-zero cold snaps. "Tonight," he began, "we're not just raising funds, we're rewriting how cities survive." Winter, applause followed. Cameras flashed. But beneath that polish was a private ache he never spoke of. 10 years earlier, there had been someone else, a woman named Leah, and a child he was told wasn't his. His lawyers had urged him to sign the release papers, calling it clean closure. He had done it, convincing himself that ambition left no room for regret. A glass of bourbon trembled in his hand as he studied the snow pelting the glass dome overhead. Somewhere, deep in his wallet, a half-snowflake pendant rested between credit cards, a brass charm engraved with coordinates of a lake cabin from another life. He hadn't looked at it in years. The evening shifted as a storm warning flickered across the massive projection screens. Polar vortex intensifying. Travel suspended citywide. The orchestra faltered for a beat before the MC adjusted the program. "We'll continue with the youth performance segment. Our youngest participants braved the cold to be here." Rowan's attention drifted toward the side stage where a stagehand ushered forward a small figure. The crowd murmured. The boy was maybe 9, bundled in a parka 2 sizes too big, hospital band still around his wrist. His guitar looked handmade, the varnish faded by travel. The MC smiled uncertainly. "This is Micah. He'll perform one original song before our closing speech." Rowan leaned forward slightly. Something in the boy's stance, resolute but trembling, tugged at him. The boy perched on a stool, his legs in braces visible under the coat, and began to strum. His voice, thin but piercing, rose above the chatter. The lyrics weren't perfect, but they were raw. A melody about waiting by the lake for someone who never came back, about snow covering footprints that never returned. Rowan froze. He knew that melody. Leah used to hum it, off-key and laughing, when they stayed by that very lake. It wasn't a song anyone else would know. He took a step toward the stage, eyes narrowing. The boy's scarf slipped down, revealing a brass pendant dangling from a red thread, half a snowflake, its jagged edge unmistakably matching the one in Rowan's wallet. His breath caught in his throat. The ballroom seemed to vanish. All he could see was the pendant glinting in the spotlight, spinning as the boy played through the final verse. Then came applause, polite but brief. Micah gave a shy smile, thanked the crowd, and wheeled himself backstage. Rowan barely heard the host's transition to the next segment. His pulse hammered. He pressed a hand to his chest pocket where the matching half rested, and the thought formed clear as frost. No, it can't be. He excused himself from the table, ignoring greetings and questions, following the hallway toward the performer's wing. The backstage area was dim, emergency lights flickering as the power wavered from the storm outside. He found the boy packing his guitar, tugging gently at the strap with mittened hands. "Hey," Rowan said softly, his voice almost cracking. "That was a brave performance out there." Micah looked up. His eyes, gray-blue, ringed with the same faint flex as Rowan's, met his. "Thanks, sir." His voice was polite, cautious. "Mom says bravery's just doing it scared." "Smart mom," Rowan murmured. "She couldn't make it tonight?" Micah shook his head. "She's a nurse." Clinic lost power. Said to sing anyway. He coughed once, covering it with his sleeve. "It helps when it's bad." "When what's bad?" Rowan asked quietly. "My legs. They hurt when it's this cold." He adjusted his braces and picked up the guitar again. "It's okay." Music helps. Rowan's gaze flicked again to the pendant. "That necklace," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Where'd you get it?" Micah looked down. "Mom gave it to me. Said my dad has the other half. She said, if I ever meet someone with it, I should listen." Outside, thunder rolled through the snowstorm, an impossible sound that felt like the sky itself responding. Rowan swallowed hard, words catching in his throat. "What's your mom's name?" The boy hesitated. "Leah." The hallway tilted. For a moment, Rowan forgot how to breathe. He managed to whisper, "Leah Carter?" Micah nodded. Something inside him broke, a quiet, clean fracture of certainty. He stepped back, dizzy, his watch reflecting the flickering light. The air felt too thin. The storm outside howled louder, glass panels shaking overhead. Rowan turned toward the exit but couldn't move. His world, the one measured in algorithms and metrics, suddenly felt irrelevant. A child, his child, had just sung his mother's lullaby on a night meant to celebrate saving strangers. And Rowan realized he'd failed the one person who should never have been a stranger at all. The backstage corridor smelled faintly of snowmelt and ozone. Outside, the blizzard pressed against the pavilion like a living thing, shaking the glass panels above. Rowan leaned against the wall, pulse still hammering. His mind raced, replaying every word the boy had said. "Mom's name is Leah. My dad has the other half. She said to listen." He reached into his wallet with trembling fingers and pulled out his own half of the brass snowflake pendant. The metal was worn smooth from years of neglect, the engraved lake coordinates still sharp under his thumb. He stared at it until his reflection blurred in the polished brass. The same coordinates, the same handmade design, the same faint gouge on the right edge where Leah had dropped it years ago. He remembered the night they'd exchanged the pendants, how the wind had howled through the pines and she'd laughed, saying, "Now we can always find our way back." He'd promised, even through a blizzard. But he hadn't found his way back. He'd chosen his company instead. Or maybe, he thought bitterly, he'd let someone choose for him. He slipped the pendant back into his pocket and pushed open the dressing room door. Micah was still there, carefully loosening his guitar strings, humming to himself, Rowan. Crouched beside him, careful to keep his tone light. "Micah," he said, "that song, you wrote it?" The boy nodded. "Mostly. Mom helped a bit. She said it was about waiting. About how sometimes people get lost in snow, but they still mean to come home." Rowan swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "That's a beautiful message." "She used to say, 'Snow keeps secrets until the sun's ready,'" Micah murmured. "Maybe this one's ready now." A chill went down Rowan's spine. "She sounds very wise." "She is," Micah said simply. "She said Dad wasn't bad." "Just scared?" Rowan exhaled shakily. "Did she ever tell you his name?" Micah hesitated. "Only that he worked with computers. That he wanted to make things that could help people." A knock on the door interrupted them. A stagehand poked her head in. "Hey, kiddo." "The clinic called. They said your mom's ambulance got stuck on the freeway. The roads are iced solid." Micah's smile faltered. "She'll be okay, right?" The woman nodded quickly, but her eyes darted toward Rowan, silently pleading for help. Rowan's instinct, the one that built empires, kicked in. "I'll handle it," he said. "Get the staff to prep a cot in the green room. And find the medic team. We'll make sure he's warm." He turned back to Micah, who was shivering now that the adrenaline of the performance had worn off. "Hey, champ?" "Let's get you somewhere safer, all right?" Micah nodded. exhaustion softening his voice. "I don't want to mess anything up." "They said the gala's important." "You didn't mess up anything," Rowan said firmly. "You might have just saved it." He guided the boy to a couch in the green room, wrapping him in a wool blanket from the coat rack. Emergency generators buzzed as the lights flickered again. Snow pounded the glass. The room filled with shadows, but the pendant around Micah's neck caught what little light there was, glinting like a promise. Rowan pulled out his phone, typing rapid commands to his assistant and legal counsel. The old files, the custody settlement, the paternity documentation, had been sealed years ago, but money had a way of opening locks. Within minutes, the PDFs appeared in his inbox. He opened them with numb fingers. And then he saw it. An old email chain, time-stamped a decade earlier, between his legal team and a junior associate. The words blurred through his tears. Subject: Paternity dispute. Advise client to sign release. From Associate, Sterling Legal Group. To Rowan, Sterling. DNA sample returned inconclusive. Recommend settlement with confidentiality clause. Given your public profile, risk of reputational damage outweighs benefit of further testing. Client Leah Carter already informed. Will proceed with closure per your verbal authorization, but he had never given that authorization. He'd been in Tokyo that week for a product launch. He scrolled further. There, a falsified note inserted to close the file, bearing his digital signature. A hot wave of anger flushed through him. Someone, his own, legal team, had buried the truth to protect his image. To protect him. His chest tightened as he realized what that meant. Leah had never lied. She'd been cornered, bullied into silence, maybe even paid to disappear. He rubbed his temples, whispering, "God, what have I done?" Micah stirred. "Mr. Sterling?" Rowan blinked back to the present. "Yeah, buddy? Did they say when Mom's coming?" "Soon," Rowan said gently. "But until then, you've got me, okay?" Micah smiled faintly. "You sound like her. When she's worried, she talks soft too." Rowan smiled back, though his throat ached. "Well, she sounds like someone worth sounding like." Outside, a gust of wind rattled the glass so hard that the snow sifted in through a vent seam. The city sirens wailed, a low, rising moan that always came before power grids failed. Rowan's phone buzzed with emergency alerts from Vantage Mind's live dashboard. Multiple blackouts, blocked ambulance routes, frozen sensors across the metro. He should have been in the command center, managing his engineers. But he couldn't look away from the boy dozing beside him. He reached out, adjusting the blanket over Micah's shoulders. His fingers brushed the pendant again, cool and familiar. He lifted his half from his pocket and held it near the boy's, the edges aligned perfectly, two halves of the same design. The metal clicked softly in the dim light. Something inside him, something that had been frozen for years, began to thaw. He whispered to himself, almost inaudibly, "If this storm brought you to me, I'm not losing you again." In the distance, a generator failed with a deep rumble, plunging the pavilion into near darkness. Only the faint golden light from Micah's pendant remained, casting a fragile glow on the boy's peaceful face. Rowan sat in that silence, the snow howling outside, realizing that the real emergency he had to respond to wasn't on his dashboard. It was right here, breathing softly under a wool blanket, wearing half of his heart around his neck. By dawn, the blizzard had transformed Minneapolis into a frozen labyrinth. Drifts buried cars to their mirrors, streetlights glowed like ghosts, and even the river had stopped moving. The North Star Pavilion was sealed in ice, its glass shell crusted with frost. Inside, the emergency generators coughed weakly, throwing erratic pools of light across the marble floor. Rowan hadn't slept. He sat near Micah's cot in the green room, jacket draped over his shoulders, eyes red from reading old case files under the dim glow of his phone. Every new document unearthed another betrayal. Emails doctored, reports deleted, consent forms rewritten. His legal team had fabricated closure and stolen 10 years of fatherhood from him. Micah stirred, blinking sleepily. "Mr. Sterling?" His voice was hoarse from the cold. Rowan leaned forward. "Morning, buddy. You feeling okay?" The boy nodded weakly. "Just a little dizzy. It happens sometimes when I don't eat." Rowan cursed himself silently. He'd been so focused on the storm that he'd forgotten breakfast. "Hang on," he said, standing. "Let's fix that." He jogged down the corridor toward the catering lounge where trays of untouched pastries and fruit sat under plastic wrap. The gala guests had long since fled before the roads closed. He grabbed what he could, bananas, a muffin, a bottle of juice, and returned. Micah smiled gratefully, peeling the banana with careful fingers. "Thanks. You're like Mom. She always brings food when everyone else forgets." Rowan sat beside him, the words twisting in his chest. "Your mom sounds amazing." "She is," Micah said through a mouthful of muffin. "She says snow makes people honest." You can't hide tracks for long. Rowan froze at that. Snow makes people honest. He remembered Leah saying the same thing on the night they'd fought, the night everything broke. She'd stood in the doorway of the lake cabin, snow in her hair, and said, "When it melts, Rowan, you'll see what you lost." He hadn't understood it. Then, he did now, his phone vibrated again, messages from his board. "Where are you? We need you at the command center. The outage is spreading." He typed a short reply. "Not leaving." Family emergency. The word family looked strange on his screen. He hadn't used it in years. Micah coughed, leaning forward in pain. "It's okay," he whispered when Rowan reached for him. "It just hurts when it's cold." "The doctor said I need a new nerve graft soon. But the insurance people lost the papers, so—" He shrugged. "Maybe next time." "Next time?" Rowan repeated, his stomach dropping. Micah nodded, unconcerned. "Mom said the clinic tried, but then we moved. It's just paperwork, right?" Rowan clenched his fists. Paperwork. The word had destroyed his life once already. "Hey," he said gently, "if someone could help with that paperwork, would you let them?" Micah tilted his head. "Like who?" Rowan hesitated. "Maybe someone who should have been around a long time ago." The boy studied him for a long time. Moment, then smiled faintly. "You talk funny. Like you're scared to say something. Maybe I am," Rowan admitted. "Sometimes grown-ups mess up worse than kids do." Micah looked away, thoughtful. "Mom says mistakes are like frostbite. You don't fix them by hiding your hand. You warm them, slow." The words hit harder than any headline ever had. A knock broke the silence. One of Rowan's security staff stepped in, dusted with snow. "Sir, power grids are collapsing across downtown. The team's asking for your authorization to activate the unreleased model." Rowan hesitated. The unreleased model, Project Boreal, was his most ambitious system yet, an AI designed to reroute emergency heat and power before outages cascaded. It wasn't fully tested. A mistake could misfire the grid completely. "Tell them to hold," he said finally. "If it fails, people freeze." "But, sir, if it works—" "I said hold." His tone snapped sharper than he meant. The guard nodded and left. Micah watched him quietly. "You're the guy from the screens, right? The one who makes the city warm again?" Rowan exhaled. "Something like that." "Then why are you scared?" the boy asked. "Because I built something to save people," Rowan said slowly, "but I couldn't even save one." Micah frowned. "You mean your family?" Rowan met his gaze. "Yeah." Micah's small fingers brushed the edge of his pendant. "Mom says maybe people come back when the snow wants them to." Rowan felt something loosen inside him, an ache shifting toward hope. He took the matching half from his pocket and placed it gently in Micah's palm. "Maybe she's right." Micah's eyes widened. "You have one too?" "Yeah," Rowan whispered. "I've had it for a long time." The boy studied the two halves, then slowly fit them together. The snowflake clicked, whole again. For a heartbeat, The room seemed brighter. Just then, a loud bang echoed through the pavilion, ice snapping against the roof. A light fixture crashed nearby, showering sparks. The generator's hum died, completely, plunging them into cold darkness. Rowan's phone lit up with an alert. Ambulance grid offline, pediatric routes impassable. He swore under his breath and grabbed his coat. "Micah, stay close to me." "Are we going outside?" the boy asked, eyes wide. "Just to the command room," Rowan said, forcing calm into his voice. "I need to get the heat back on before people get hurt." He lifted Micah gently into his arms. The boy's weight was lighter than it should have been, his breath shallow but steady. As they stepped into the hall, snowflakes blew through a broken window, glinting in the emergency light like tiny shards of truth. Rowan thought about Leah somewhere across town, maybe stranded, maybe hurt, and about the decade between what he believed and what was real. He pressed his cheek briefly to Micah's head, whispering, "Hold on, kiddo. I'm not losing you this time." Outside, the city wailed under the storm, but somewhere beneath that chaos, the faintest hum of hope began to rise, like a signal returning through static, guiding them home. The command suite of the North Star Pavilion had become a crisis nerve center overnight. Portable monitors flickered with grid data, showing expanding blackout zones across Minneapolis. Engineers hunched over terminals powered by backup batteries, while the wind screamed through broken vents. Rowan carried Micah in, set him on a rolling chair near a heater, and switched immediately into action. "Bring up the live relay from Sector 9A, he ordered, shrugging into his overcoat. "Cross-reference with wind patterns and ice accumulation on the relay towers." A junior engineer glanced up. "Sir, with respect, you shouldn't even be here." "The roads are closing. You could lose comms. Then I'll lose them standing where it matters," Rowan said flatly. His tone silenced the room. Even after 10 years of press conferences and precision control, he'd never sounded more human or more afraid. Micah watched him from the chair, rubbing his hands near the heater's weak glow. "You're really the boss?" Rowan managed a small smile. "Technically. But right now, the storm's in charge." The boy nodded, glancing toward the frozen windows. "Mom says storms make people tell the truth." That hit harder than any report could. He exhaled slowly. "She's right again." He returned to the console. The outage map pulsed red and orange. Every second meant another home without heat, another ambulance trapped on black ice. "All right," he said quietly to the team. "Override the lockdown. Deploy Boreal manually." The lead engineer stared. "Sir, that's experimental. If it fails, we could overload the substations, then reroute it through the redundant loops. I designed them for this exact failure pattern." His staff exchanged nervous glances, but they obeyed. Keys clacked, lights blinked back to life, and slowly, like embers rekindling, green began to creep across the screen. Sectors that had been cold for hours started warming. One by one, neighborhoods returned to light. Micah let out a small gasp. "You fixed it." Rowan shook his head. "We fixed it." He crouched beside him. "You kept me in the room." The boy frowned. "I didn't do anything." "You reminded me what it's for," Rowan said softly. "Why I built any of this in the first place." For a moment, the only sound was the storm battering the glass. Then Micah whispered, "Mom says people build things so they don't feel so small." He smiled sadly. "Your mom's a poet." "Sometimes she's just tired," Micah murmured. "She works 2 jobs. Nights at the clinic. She says I'm her reason for staying brave." Rowan swallowed hard, guilt and admiration twisting together. "She's been brave for both of us." The door burst open, his head of security, snow crusted on his coat. "Sir, we found Leah Carter. Paramedics picked her up 2 blocks away. She refused to go to the hospital until she knew her son was safe." Micah's eyes lit up. "Mom?" "She's okay," the guard assured. "She's on her way here now." Rowan's breath left him in a shudder. He'd prepared speeches, apologies, even legal drafts, but the thought of seeing her again after 10 years made his chest feel too tight to speak. Micah looked up at him, sensing the shift. You know her, don't you? Rowan froze. Before he could answer, the door opened again. A gust of cold air swept through, carrying snow and the scent of winter. Leah stepped inside, bundled in a paramedic's coat, her face pale from exhaustion but unmistakably the same. The same chestnut hair tied in a rushed braid. The same quiet strength in her eyes. She stopped short when she saw Rowan. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "Rowan?" He stood, heart hammering. "Leah." Micah looked between them, confusion knitting his brow. "You two know each other?" Leah's voice trembled. "We did." Once Rowan took a hesitant step closer. "You should sit." "The roads—" "Don't," she said sharply, though her voice cracked halfway through. "Don't." Start with concern after 10 years of silence. The room went still. Even the engineers pretended to check data they'd already verified. Rowan's throat tightened. "Leah, I swear to you, I didn't know—" "Didn't know," she cut in. "Your lawyers sent men to my apartment. They said you wanted nothing to do with me. They offered a settlement for silence." "I never saw it," Rowan said quickly. "They forged documents." "I found the emails tonight." He pulled up the files on his tablet, hands shaking. "Look, timestamps, signatures. I was in Tokyo that week. They buried it all." She stared at the screen, her anger faltering into disbelief. "You're saying you didn't tell them to—" "No," he said, voice breaking. "I thought you left because you didn't want a reminder. They told me the test was negative, that you wanted money, not truth." Leah pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "And I thought you wanted to erase us." Micah's small voice broke through the silence. "Mom, is he my dad?" Rowan looked at him, eyes wet. "If you'll let me be." Leah's knees gave out. She caught herself against the console. Rowan stepped forward instinctively, stopping just short of touching her. "I should have fought harder," he whispered. "For you." For him. For what was real, tears spilled down her cheeks. "We lost 10 years. Then let me make the next 10 count." Micah reached out, holding both their hands with tiny fingers chilled from the draft. "Mom says snow makes people honest," he said softly. "I think the storm was just waiting for you both to tell the truth." The pendant around his neck glinted in the generator light. Rowan took his half and pressed it into Leah's palm. The two pieces fit, just as they had a decade ago. For the first time in years, she didn't pull away. Outside, the storm began to ease, the first weak rays of morning cutting through the clouds. The city was still battered, but alive, and somewhere inside the quiet, 3 people who had once been strangers began to breathe the hud. Same rhythm again. The morning light bled slowly through the pavilion's frost-fogged glass, turning the blizzard's wreckage into a field of gold. For the first time in 12 hours, the hum of the generators steadied. Steam rose from the vents where heat began to return, and the bitter air softened into something almost forgiving. Rowan stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, issuing quiet instructions to his staff to suspend trading activity and send all non-critical employees home. He could handle markets later. Right now, there were things numbers couldn't fix. Behind him, Leah sat with Micah on a folding cot. She helped him adjust his braces while murmuring the same encouragements Rowan remembered from another lifetime. "Slow and steady, remember?" "We're not racing the snow." Micah laughed, a little breathless. "You always say that." Rowan turned at the sound, so familiar it pulled at him, and caught the way Leah's fingers lingered protectively near the boy's shoulder. She looked up and saw him watching. The silence between them was fragile, full of things both of them had waited too long to say. He crossed the room slowly, stopping a few feet away. "The storm's easing. Once the roads open, I can get you both home." Leah's tone was guarded. "We have one, thank you. A little duplex near Hennepin. It's not much, but it's ours." He nodded. "Still, let me send a car. I owe you that." Her jaw tightened. "You don't owe me favors, Rowan." "You owe him truth." Micah glanced between them, uneasy. Rowan knelt so his eyes met hers across the cot. "You're right," he said quietly. "So, let me start there." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a folded envelope creased from years of storage. "I found this in my legal archives tonight. It's your handwriting." Leah froze. "That letter was never sent." "I know," Rowan said. "They kept it from me." Her eyes filled before she even opened it. The ink had bled slightly where snowmelt once touched the paper. Her voice trembled as she read, "You once promised me that no storm could make you forget what was real." "I hope that's still true. If you ever find this, know that I didn't leave out of anger. I left because your world wouldn't let me in." Leah folded the paper again, hands shaking. "I wrote that the night your lawyers came. I thought, maybe one day you'd wonder." "I wondered every day," Rowan said softly, "but I buried it under work because wondering hurt too much." Micah looked up at both of them. "Mom, he didn't know." "I know, honey." Leah brushed a tear away, forcing a smile. "Sometimes grown-ups mess up bigger than kids do." Rowan reached into his wallet again, this time pulling out a faded photo. Leah, at 28, laughing beside the frozen lake cabin, snowflakes in her hair. "I never took this out." "I just told everyone it was a stock photo from a retreat." Leah gave a shaky laugh that melted into a sigh. "You always were terrible at lying." "I'm worse at living with them," he said. "Let me make this right, for him and for you." The room fell quiet except for the distant groan of plows carving through the streets outside. Micah rested his head on his mother's arm, eyelids heavy. Rowan lowered his voice. "The hospital denied his surgery because of lapsed coverage, didn't they?" Leah hesitated, then nodded. "We lost the supplemental insurance when I changed clinics. They said we'd have to reapply after the new year. He's been waiting since August." Rowan clenched his fists. "That's not waiting. That's neglect." "Don't," she said softly. "We do what we can." "The system forgets people like us." He met her eyes. "Then I'll remind it." Leah frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "I'm setting up a direct trust in his name by tonight. No lawyers, no loopholes. You'll never have to fight for another approval again." She looked skeptical. "You can't buy back lost time with money, Rowan." He shook his head. "No, but I can use it to make sure he doesn't lose more." Micah stirred again, eyes fluttering open. "Mom?" "Shh," Leah soothed. "We're here." He blinked at Rowan. "Did you fix the lights again?" Rowan smiled faintly. "Trying to." The boy reached under his blanket and pulled out the pendant halves now joined by a paperclip chain. "It looks better together," he said sleepily. "It doesn't feel so heavy anymore." Leah brushed his hair back, but her gaze lingered on Rowan. There was hurt still, but something else now. Curiosity, maybe, or the first fragile spark of belief. Outside, the sun burned through the last veil of snow clouds, and for the first time in days, light flooded the frozen city. Rowan turned back to her. "Leah, after the gala, there'll be reporters, investors, everyone wanting a story. I'll tell them the truth. No PR version. Just the truth." She studied him. "And what is the truth, Rowan?" He looked down at the reunited pendant, then back at her. "That I built an empire trying to predict disasters, but I never learned how to prevent my own." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Maybe you still can." He nodded slowly. "If you'll let me try." Leah exhaled, eyes softening. "We'll see." Micah, already half asleep, smiled faintly between them. "Mom says snow keeps secrets until people are ready. I think the snow's tired now." Rowan looked through the glass at the streets clearing below. "So am I, kid," he murmured. "So am I." The heater hummed, spreading steady warmth at last. For the first time it felt like something in the room, and in their lives, had begun to thaw. By afternoon, the worst of the storm had passed. Minneapolis was a maze of glittering ice and sunlit rooftops, the kind of cold that bit its skin but looked breathtaking from behind glass. Plows moved cautiously through the streets, leaving neat gray ribbons in the snow. Inside the North Star Pavilion, Rowan's temporary command center now doubled as a waiting room. The city's emergency crews were running on Vantage Minds Live Network, a system Rowan had built years ago but was only now truly using. Yet his focus wasn't on data or grid updates. It was on the quiet boy sitting beside him, sketching guitars on a paper napkin. Micah hummed softly, lost in his drawing, while Leah reviewed forms a volunteer nurse had brought. A few tables away, a local clinic's field director arranged testing kits, rapid DNA verification units used for missing person cases during disasters. Rowan stood, hands in his pockets, pulse ticking faster with each passing minute. "You're sure this is safe?" The nurse nodded. "Non-invasive. Buccal swab, 15 minutes for results. We use it all the time for family reunifications. No record upload without written consent." Leah's eyes flicked to Rowan. "This is your idea, not mine." He nodded. "I know. I need to be certain." For him, Micah looked up from his drawing, brow furrowed. "What's going on?" Rowan crouched beside him. "Hey, buddy. Remember how you said your mom told you your dad might have the other half of your pendant? Yeah. Well," Rowan said gently, "this is a way to find out if that's true." Micah blinked. "Like science?" "Exactly like science." Leah's tone softened. "You don't have to if you don't want to, honey." The boy hesitated, then looked at Rowan. "Do you want to know?" Rowan swallowed hard. "More than anything." Micah gave a tiny nod. Then, okay. The nurse handed over sterile swabs explaining each step carefully. Micah did his first, cheeks puffed as he followed instructions. Rowan went next, his hand trembling slightly. When they were done, the sample slid into the small desktop analyzer, an unassuming white box humming with quiet certainty. 15 minutes felt like 15 years. Leah paced near the window, arms folded. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now," she muttered. "Part of me wants it to say yes. The other part is afraid of what happens next." Rowan finished softly. "I get it." She glanced at him. "You don't. You've had choices. I've had consequences." He didn't argue. "Then maybe it's time I start sharing them." The machine beeped once. The nurse approached with a printout, eyes flicking between them. "Results are conclusive." She hesitated, then handed the page to Leah. Leah unfolded it slowly. Her eyes moved across the lines, lips parting in disbelief. Then she handed it to Rowan without a word. Paternal match probability, 99.99%. For a moment, he just stared. Numbers had always been his language, but these digits hit differently, like truth carved in frost. He let out a shaky breath, half laugh, half sob. Leah's voice broke the silence. "Well, science doesn't lie." Micah looked between them. "What's it say?" Rowan knelt again, showing him the page. "It says I'm your dad," and the boy blinked, processing. "For real?" "For real." Micah's face stayed blank for a heartbeat, then cracked into a smile so bright it hurt to look at. "Mom," he whispered, "I told you." "I told you the snowflake meant..." Something Leah's tears spilled before she could stop them. She pulled Micah into her arms, pressing her face into his hair. Rowan stood frozen, watching the two of them framed in the winter light, and realized he'd never seen anything so beautiful, or so undeserved. When Leah finally looked up, her voice was soft. "So, what happens now?" Rowan exhaled slowly. "Now, I fix what I broke." She shook her head. "You can't fix 10 years." "No," he admitted, "but I can start with 1 day. 1 hour. 1 promise I actually keep." Micah tugged at his sleeve. "You could start by helping with my music project." Rowan blinked. "Music project?" "Yeah," Micah said eagerly. It's for school. Soundtrack of my life. I wanted to finish it, but my laptop broke. Mom said maybe next semester. Rowan smiled. Then I guess we'll get you a new one. Top specs. And maybe, if your mom says it's okay, I'll help you record it. Leah arched a brow. He doesn't need expensive gifts. He needs time. I know, Rowan said quietly. That's why I'm offering mine. Something in his voice made her pause. She studied him, searching for the man she used to know, the one who once wrote lullabies in code, who promised he'd never let ambition turn him into a stranger. For the first time, she saw a glimmer of that man again. Micah beamed. Can we start tomorrow? Rowan chuckled softly. Tomorrow's a good day to start. But even as he smiled, he felt the tremor of his phone in his pocket. A message from his board chair flashed across the screen. Urgent. Media leak. Story breaking. AICEO's secret son found at charity gala. He turned the screen face down before Leah could see it. His stomach sank. The world outside was about to know everything he'd tried to rediscover in private. He looked back at Leah and Micah, laughing quietly over a half-eaten muffin, and felt the weight of the decision forming inside him. He could silence the story, or he could tell it himself, and for once in his life he already knew the right choice. By nightfall, the city was thawing. Snowplows rumbled through downtown Minneapolis, their orange strobes flashing against the glass towers like warning beacons. But inside the North Star Pavilion, the quiet before another kind of storm had settled, the kind that couldn't be measured in inches or wind speed. Rowan sat at the long oak conference table in the media lounge, the place where, hours earlier, donors had laughed over champagne. Now, a half-dozen phones vibrated non-stop with alerts. His publicist, pale and trembling, held out her tablet. It's everywhere, she said, voice tight. Hashtag Gala Child, Secret Son, your name trending worldwide. They're calling it a publicity stunt. Leah stiffened. What? The publicist glanced at her, then back at Rowan. Some reporters claim you staged the reunion to soften your image before the federal ethics review next month. A few even said the boy was a hired actor. Micah flinched. But I'm not. I know, Rowan said quickly, kneeling. Beside him. Hey, look at me. None of that's true. People online say things when they don't understand. Leah crossed her arms, shaking. They're dragging his name through mud because of you. Because you couldn't keep this private. I didn't leak it, Rowan said. But I can end it. He turned to his communications team. Prepare a live statement in 30 minutes. No press filter, no spin. I'll speak directly, sir, the publicist protested. That's not advised. Legal. I'm done taking advice from lawyers who hide the truth, Rowan snapped. The room fell silent. Leah looked at him, startled, not by the anger, but by the conviction behind it. He straightened his tie and looked down at Micah. You okay if I talk about us? About the truth? Micah hesitated. If Mom says it's okay. Leah met her son's gaze, then sighed. If it helps him understand what kind of man you are, do it right. He nodded. I will. 8:47 p.m. North Star Pavilion, live stream feed. The feed opened on Rowan, standing before the frosted glass wall, Minneapolis's skyline glittering behind him. He wore the same suit from the gala, but the top button of his shirt was undone, his hair slightly disheveled. The world saw not a CEO, but a man who looked like he'd just walked through a storm. Good evening, he began, voice steady but raw. Tonight, the internet did what it does best. It turned something human into something sensational. So let me correct the record before rumors do it for me. He paused, hands clasped before him. The boy at last night's gala. His name is Micah Carter. He sang to raise money for medical relief. And yes, he's my son. Gasps rippled through the small press audience. Flashbulbs erupted. Rowan kept his gaze fixed on the camera. I didn't know until last night. 10 years ago, I trusted a team that told me a lie. They falsified documents to protect my reputation, and I believed them because it was easier than facing uncertainty. That decision cost me a decade of my child's life and cost his mother 10 years of single parenthood. There's no press release that can undo that. There's only truth and action. He reached into his pocket and held up the reunited brass snowflake pendant. This belonged to his mother and me. We each kept half. When I saw his on stage, I knew. It took a storm to bring us back together, but storms, as my son reminded me, make people honest. Leah stood off camera, tears glinting in her eyes. Micah clutched her hand, whispering, "He said it right." Rowan continued, his tone softening. To anyone watching, if you've ever buried the truth because it was inconvenient, learn from me. Don't. It's colder to live with silence than any Minnesota winter. He set the pendant down beside the microphone. Effective immediately, I'm establishing the Hearthline Trust, a fund to support pediatric winter care, adaptive mobility, and single parents who've fallen through the cracks. It'll be overseen not by my company, but by an independent board, one that includes Leah Carter and, when he's old enough, Micah. The camera zoomed in on his expression. No PR polish, just quiet resolve. This isn't image repair. It's restitution. The truth costs more than reputation, and I'm ready to pay in full. He looked directly into the lens. To Leah and to Micah, thank you for giving me the chance to stand in the light again. Then, simply, he stepped back. The broadcast ended. The room stayed still for several seconds before the phone started pinging again. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares, messages flooding in from around the world. Courage. Finally a CEO with a heart. Proof that redemption is real. Leah exhaled shakily, her arms wrapped around herself. You just told the whole world. Rowan nodded. Because they were already talking. Now they'll hear it from the right voice. Micah's voice was small. Are people going to be mad at you? Maybe, Rowan said, smiling faintly. But that's okay. I'm used to the cold, Leah blinked away tears. You really meant what you said, didn't you? He nodded once. Every word. For a moment, none of them moved. Then Micah climbed down from his chair and tugged Rowan's sleeve. Dad, he said softly, tasting the word, does this mean we can go home together? Rowan looked at Leah. If your mom will let us. Leah hesitated, then gave a quiet nod. For tonight. Just until things calmed down, Rowan's voice cracked. That's all I need. Outside, the night sky cleared to reveal stars glinting above the frozen city. Cameras stopped flashing. Phones stopped buzzing. And, for the first time since the blizzard began, silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. By midnight, the storm had surrendered to a quiet, brittle calm. The streets glistened under the sodium lights, plowed into narrow corridors that steamed faintly in the freezing air. When Rowan's SUV turned onto Hennepin Avenue, the wipers scraped against the windshield's icy crust. He slowed near a modest roadside motel, whose neon sign flickered weakly between vacancy and Vaca-Y. Leah's duplex remained inaccessible. Downed trees had blocked the side street, so they'd settled on the closest warm place. It wasn't much, but it was quiet. Snow muffled the world into soft silence. Rowan carried Micah's overnight bag inside while Leah signed at the front desk. The clerk, a tired woman in a Christmas sweater, blinked when she saw him. Wait, aren't you? Rowan smiled faintly. Just a father tonight. The woman nodded, lips curving into a knowing smile. Room 203. Heat steady. God bless, hun. Inside, the room smelled of cheap coffee and fabric softener. The heater rattled but held steady at 70. Micah limped toward the single bed, sitting gingerly as Leah pulled off his braces. Rowan took the armchair, uncertain of where he fit, unwilling to intrude. Leah looked up at him. You don't have to stay. I know, he said, voice low, but I'd like to. She hesitated. The light caught her face. weary but still fierce. He falls asleep better if someone reads. Usually, Treasure Island. It's in his bag, Rowan nodded, retrieving the worn paperback. Its spine was cracked from years of handling. Good choice, he said softly. I read this with my dad, too. Micah's eyes widened. You had a dad? Rowan chuckled sadly. For a while. He worked on the docks in Duluth, taught me how to sail, and how to pretend I wasn't scared of storms. Did it work? Not really, Rowan admitted, but pretending got easier. He started reading, his voice smoothing into the cadence of memory. Micah leaned back, eyelids heavy, the steady hum of the heater syncing with the rhythm of Rowan's words. By the time Long John Silver was plotting his mutiny, the boy had drifted to sleep, his small hand resting over the pendant on his chest. Rowan closed the book and watched him for a long moment, his heart aching in ways he couldn't name. Leah quietly hung up her coat and stepped out onto the small balcony, where the night air glowed pale blue under the street lamps. After a minute, Rowan joined her. The cold bit his skin instantly. Snow squeaked underfoot. The city stretched below them, its skyline stitched together with light. Leah didn't look at him. He hasn't slept that deeply in months, she said softly. Usually he's up half the night from the pain. I'll make sure he gets the surgery, Rowan said. No delays. No insurance games. She turned to him, arms crossed. You keep saying that like you can just sign a paper and fix everything. I know I can't fix the past, he said, but I can make the future less cruel. Her gaze softened but didn't yield. I don't want him thinking money fixes love. He needs someone who shows up, not someone who sponsors it, he nodded slowly. Then I'll show up. Leah studied him, trying to decide if the man before her was the same one who once left without looking back. His face was sharper now, the edges carved by success and regret, but his eyes, still that piercing, blue, held something different, a humility she hadn't seen before. Why now, Rowan? She asked quietly. Why after all these years? He hesitated. Because for the first time, I saw what I built from the outside. A company that predicts blizzards, powered by algorithms that never feel the cold. And I realized I'd designed my life the same way. Smart, efficient, and completely heartless. Leah looked away. You used to be kind. I want to be again, he said. If you'll let me try. The wind whistled between the buildings. Somewhere below, a snowplow clanged over a manhole cover, the sound echoing like distant thunder. Leah exhaled. You really went on live television for this? He nodded. If the world's going to judge me, let them see the truth they buried. And if your board fires you? Then I'll have time for what matters. Leah huffed a quiet laugh. You sound like a man who finally found his conscience. I did, he said, glancing toward the window. He's 9 years old and sleeps. With a guitar under his pillow, Leah's expression softened despite herself. You always had a way with words. Not with people, Rowan murmured. They stood in silence for a while, watching the faint aurora shimmer over the skyline. Leah finally turned toward the door. Get some sleep, Rowan. You've got a long road ahead. He didn't argue. I'll take the chair. You don't have to. I know, he said again, but I want to. Inside, the heater hummed steady as Micah dreamed, one hand still gripping the joined snowflake pendant. Rowan lowered himself into the armchair, exhaustion washing through him. The city lights flickered against the frost on the window, painting his face in gold and blue. Before sleep claimed him, he whispered into the quiet, No more halves. Not ever again. And for the first time in years, he slept without guilt. When morning came, pale sunlight spilled across the thin motel curtains. Leah woke to find Rowan already awake, his jacket draped over Micah like a blanket. Outside, the roads were clear. The storm had moved on. She watched him for a moment before whispering, He's going to need you to keep that promise. Rowan looked up, eyes steady. I will. She nodded once. Then maybe, just maybe, you deserve another chance. Outside, the first snowplow of the new day passed by, leaving a clean path through the frost. For them, it was more than a road. It was a beginning. By noon the next day, the quiet of the motel had been replaced by the hum of obligation. Rowan's phone was a hive of missed calls. Board members, investors, media outlets, and one particularly blunt message from his CFO. Emergency session in 1 hour. Damage control required. Leah sat at the small table by the window, sipping motel coffee that tasted faintly of tin. Micah, propped up on pillows, strummed his guitar softly, one of the strings slightly flat, his humming low and content. "Do you have to go?" he asked without looking up. Rowan knelt beside the bed, adjusting the tuning peg. "Just for a bit, kiddo. Grown-up things. But I'll be back before dinner." Leah glanced over the rim of her cup. "That's what you used to say 10 years ago." He met her gaze evenly. "This time I mean it." She studied him for a moment before nodding. "You'd better." An hour later, Rowan stepped into the glass-walled boardroom of Vantage Mind's downtown headquarters. It felt colder inside than out. His executives lined the long walnut table, faces drawn, some sympathetic, others hard with calculation. On the far end sat Chairwoman Eunice Park, her silver hair immaculate, her tone frost-edged. "Rowan," she began, "we all saw the broadcast. You've created quite the crisis." He set his briefcase down calmly. "I told the truth." "You detonated a public relations bomb," snapped CFO Morris Becker. "Shareholders are spooked. Regulators are circling, and the press is calling this a sympathy stunt before the ethics review." Rowan folded his hands. "Then they can circle all they want. I'm not apologizing for being a father. Fatherhood doesn't excuse negligence," Morris countered. "You're mixing personal scandal with corporate image. You can't run a company like this. Too emotional, too unpredictable." Rowan's voice stayed even. "Funny. That's what they said about weather until I built something that proved them wrong." The room murmured. Eunice leaned forward. "We're voting to suspend your executive privileges, pending review." Rowan met her gaze. "Go ahead. But remember, every line of the Hearthline system, every line of code that just saved this city, came from my terminal. You freeze me out. You freeze out half the winter grid." Silence. The weight of truth hung heavy. Eunice sighed. "You're daring us to call your bluff?" "No," Rowan said quietly. "I'm daring you to remember why this company exists." Vantage Mind was built to keep people alive in the cold. Last night it did exactly that. Don't let fear make you forget humanity. Morris scoffed. "And what? We trade. Profits for sentiment?" Rowan stood, eyes flashing. "For purpose, Morris." "You think this is about sentiment? A child froze to death in this city last winter because our predictive model missed a gap between grid zones. That's on us. You can chase optics. I'll chase outcomes." The room went still. Eunice studied him for a long moment, then leaned back. "You've always been our best and worst gamble, Rowan." He nodded. "Then double down." "I'm not running from this storm. I'm standing in it." After a tense beat, she said, "You'll have 72 hours to stabilize the PR fallout. If Hearthline delivers, we'll table the suspension vote. Fail, and you step down. Deal," Rowan said. He turned and walked out, coat slung over his arm. The cold air from the corridor hit his face like clarity. For the first time in years, he wasn't fighting for control. He was fighting for meaning. Back at the motel, Micah sat cross-legged on the bed, sketching a snowflake with two halves joined by a thread. Leah folded laundry from their small duffel, humming softly. When Rowan returned, the boy looked up immediately. "Did you win?" Rowan smiled tiredly. "Still snowing, but I think the wind's changing." Micah frowned in concentration. "Mom says sometimes snow doesn't stop. It just gets softer." Leah laughed quietly. "He's been saying that since he was 4. Rowan hung his coat and knelt beside the bed. "You're a poet. You know that?" Micah shrugged. "Mom says I just listen better than I talk." Rowan smiled. Then you'll do just fine in boardrooms one day. Leah arched an eyebrow. Don't you dare recruit him yet. He chuckled. Not until after middle school. They shared a look, wary but not hostile anymore. Something in Leah's expression had softened, thawed by the quiet persistence of the man before her. I'll have to head back out tonight, Rowan said gently, the grid rollouts expanding. Hearthlines launching beta alerts. But before I go, I want to show you both something. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a slim tablet. On screen glowed a prototype interface. Hearthline. AI for winter resilience. Beneath it, a map dotted with glowing orange nodes connected across the city. These, he explained, are micro-heating pods. I'm deploying the first ones along bus stops, clinics, and shelters, powered by our prediction algorithms. No approval needed, no red tape. Anyone freezing can walk in and get warm. Micah's eyes widened. So, no one has to wait in the cold anymore? That's the goal, Rowan said softly. Leah blinked hard, looking away. You're turning guilt into action. Maybe, Rowan admitted, but if it keeps one kid from shivering tonight, that's enough. Micah smiled. Mom says when people do the right thing, the snow sounds different. Leah smirked gently. It does sound quieter tonight. Rowan leaned against the window frame, watching snowflakes drift under the streetlight. Then maybe we're finally listening. That night, while Leah tucked Micah in, Rowan sat outside in the car with his phone lit by dashboard glow. Messages poured in, support from doctors, rescue crews, even strangers who'd seen the broadcast. One message caught his eye, unsigned but familiar. You can't change what you lost, but you can change what you stand for. Keep standing. E.P. He smiled faintly. Eunice Park had voted against suspension. He turned the engine off, letting silence settle. Across the street, Leah's window glowed warm yellow against the snow. He watched until the light went out, the pendant in his pocket catching the reflection of a new dawn forming inside him. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. 2 mornings later, Minneapolis woke to an eerie kind of peace. Streets salted, skies clear, and the bitter wind subdued to a whisper. Yet beneath that calm, the city was buzzing with one name. Rowan Sterling. The CEO who admitted to the world he'd found a lost son. The man who faced a blizzard, both outside and inside his own walls, vantage minds. Glass Tower glowed amber in the sunrise as Rowan pulled into the garage. He was running on 3 hours of sleep, but for once, he didn't feel hollow. He'd spent the night in Leah's living room helping Micah tune his guitar, laughing softly as the boy insisted on rewriting lyrics to fit better with snow. It had been clumsy, awkward, beautiful, and terrifyingly real. Today, he would try to teach an entire company what that felt like. He took the elevator to the 33rd floor, straight into the Central Development Hub. Monitors lined the space like watchful eyes. Coders huddled over their terminals with energy drinks and the kind of fatigue only purpose could justify. "Morning," Rowan said, setting down his coat. Half the room froze. The other half applauded quietly. "Sir," a lead engineer said, voice shaky. "You really did it. You put everything out there. I told the truth," Rowan replied simply. "Now it's time we write that truth into what we build." He tapped the nearest screen, bringing up the Hearthline interface, its live map dotted with orange and green nodes glowing like embers across the city. "We're moving past prediction," he said. "From now on, Hearthline isn't just about data, it's about empathy. Every alert, every decision point needs to reflect the human reality behind it. The mother deciding whether to use her last gallon of gas to heat the car or drive to a clinic. The child who can't walk fast enough to outrun frostbite. We're not coding for numbers anymore. We're coding for people." The room was silent, except for the hum of machines. "Sir," one junior developer said carefully, "the board might push back. They'll want proof that empathy scales." Rowan smiled faintly. "Then we'll show them." We'll make the algorithm listen. He turned to the whiteboard and began sketching a model, a feedback loop using citizen input and open data. No more walls. We opened the Hearthline to the public. Real-time feedback, transparent code audits, emergency reports. Verified by communities. Let them see what we see. A murmur of approval rippled through the team. Rowan handed the marker to the developer. Start with the signal filters. If a kid sends a distress ping from a cold zone, the system prioritizes, not by income, not by location, but by urgency. She nodded, eyes bright. We'll call it the Micah Protocol. Rowan blinked. The what? The engineer smiled. It fits, doesn't it? The boy who reminded us what we're really doing this for. A soft laugh escaped him. Yeah, it fits. Across town, Leah guided Micah's wheelchair through the pediatric rehab unit. The walls were painted with bright murals, penguins, sled dogs, northern lights. The hospital director met them at the door, smiling warmly. Mrs. Carter, the Hearthline. Trust approved your file this morning. Surgery scheduled for Friday. Leah froze. Already? That's impossible, the doctor chuckled. Apparently not when your sponsor is the man funding half the winter grid. Everything's cleared. Specialist flown in from Mayo. Full recovery program covered. Micah clapped his hands. See, Mom? Told you Snow listens if you talk nice enough. Leah laughed, brushing his hair back. Remind me to thank whoever taught you stubborn optimism. He grinned. You and him both. Her smile faltered. You really like him, huh? Yeah, Micah said, unbothered. He's not scared of the cold. Leah's chest tightened. No, she whispered. Not anymore. That afternoon, as the Hearthline dashboards went live citywide, news anchors across Minnesota reported the same thing. For the first time, every major district's heating network stayed operational through a post-blizzard freeze. Rowan's face flashed across TV screens, voice calm and resolute. Technology without empathy is just machinery. We owe the world better. Leah watched the broadcast from the hospital cafeteria. The reporter mentioned that public donations to Hearthline had already topped $10 million in 24 hours. She stirred her coffee, trying to reconcile the man on screen with the one who'd quietly read Treasure Island to her son 2 nights earlier. The nurse beside her murmured, "He looks like he means it." Leah nodded. "He does. I just hope it lasts." That evening, Rowan drove straight from headquarters to the hospital, still wearing his conference badge and fatigue like a second skin. He found Micah sitting in a therapy room surrounded by foam bars and silver crutches. The boy was trying to balance, sweat beading on his forehead. "Hey," Rowan said softly. "You're working hard." Micah grinned, catching his breath. "Gotta get ready for surgery. Mom says if I can stand 5 seconds today, I can stand 10 tomorrow. Rowan crouched beside him. "I'd bet on that." "Mom says you bet on everything," he chuckled. "She's not wrong." Micah's smile faded a little. "Are people still mad at you?" "The TV keeps saying mean stuff." Rowan hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Some are. Some think I told the truth. Too late." "Did you?" "Yes," Rowan said quietly. "But the best time to tell the truth is before the storm. The second best is after you survive it." Micah nodded solemnly. "Then I think we both survived it." Rowan's throat tightened. "Yeah, kiddo." We did. Just then, Leah entered, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. "All right, heroes," she said, passing one to each. "No more philosophy until after you drink these." Micah raised his cup. "To the snow that kept our secret." Rowan clinked his gently. "And to the son who found it." Leah's eyes shimmered. For a brief, fragile second, the 3 of them were just family. No cameras, no boardrooms, no storms. Then Micah grinned mischievously. "Hey, Dad?" Rowan froze at the word, heartbeat skipping. "Yeah, buddy?" "When I can walk again, can we go to that lake from the pendant? Mom says it's real." Rowan smiled through tears. "Yeah, it's real. And yes, we'll go there together." Leah leaned against the doorframe, watching him make a promise she could finally believe. Outside, a light snow began to fall again, not fierce this time, but gentle, like applause from the sky. And somewhere inside VantageMind's main server, the first public message arrived on the Hearthline dashboard. Kid safe. Shelter warm. Thank you. The system logged it automatically. Tagged under Micah Protocol. Status resolved. 3 days later, the headlines shifted from warmth to warfare. While Hearthline's numbers soared and the public lauded Rowan's honesty, a darker thread had begun to unravel. Overnight, anonymous files leaked online. Old VantageMind contracts, internal memos, even private emails from the company's ethics division. Some messages hinted that Rowan's initial AI prototypes had used proprietary municipal data without permission. A few were outright doctored, but the damage didn't care about nuance. The morning news banner read, "Hero or Hacker. CEO's Past Casts. Shadow over Hearthline's Future." Leah saw it first on the waiting room TV while Micah was in physical therapy. Her stomach turned cold. When Rowan arrived, late and unshaven, she didn't bother with hello. "You need to fix this," she said flatly. "I know." His voice was raw, gravelly. "It's sabotage. Someone wants Hearthline shut down. You're the face of it now," she said. "They'll go after you before they ever touch your company." He rubbed his temple. "I can handle the blowback. What I can't handle is watching people freeze again because someone's chasing a headline." Leah hesitated, then asked softly, "You think it's internal?" He nodded once. "Morris Becker. He's been waiting for this. If he can tank public trust, the board votes me out and installs him before the next fiscal report. And then Hearthline dies," she said. Rowan's eyes met hers. "Unless I prove this leak's fake, and fast." That afternoon, he was back in the control room on the 33rd floor. Snow streaked the windows, a gray sleet that felt more personal than weather. Engineers moved. Like ghosts, whispering updates. Every monitor blazed with error logs, city networks denying access, servers locking out emergency nodes. Eunice Park appeared beside him, hands clasped. "They want your resignation by midnight," she said quietly. "They claim the leak proves you bypassed consent laws." "It's fabricated," Rowan snapped. "Those emails were spliced together from beta builds we never used." "I believe you," Eunice said calmly. "But you'll need proof that's clear enough for the public to believe it too." He turned toward the coding desk. "Pull the meta timestamps from every AI commit since year 1. I want blockchain cross-checks on all signature hashes. If someone tampered with my records, they left fingerprints." A young analyst hesitated. "Sir, that'll take hours." "Then start now," he said. "The city doesn't freeze while we play politics." Eunice gave him a look that was half pride, half sorrow. "You've changed, Rowan. The man I hired would have hidden behind PR." "You're burning the ice from both ends." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe I learned it from a 9-year-old." At the hospital, Leah wheeled Micah into his pre-op room. He was nervous but pretending not to be, tapping rhythm patterns on his guitar case. "Hey," she said softly. "You want me to read the book tonight?" He shook his head. "Dad promised he'd come." She tried not to let the word Dad sting. "You trust him that much?" Micah shrugged. "He kept every promise so far. Even the big ones," Leah smiled faintly. "That's new for him." Before she could say more, her phone buzzed. Rowan's name, the text short and frantic. "Might miss surgery. Board staging emergency press. Don't let him be scared. Please." She exhaled slowly, typing back. "He's not scared. Just make it right." Then she looked at her son, his face pale but brave, and added softly, "You've got both halves of your snowflake, remember? You're not alone anymore." At 6 p.m., the press assembled in the VantageMind atrium. Cameras, aimed at the marble podium where Rowan stood alone. The room glowed with harsh white lights that made his fatigue look like penance. He began without preamble. 3 days ago, I told you the truth about my son. Tonight, I'll tell you the truth about my company. He held up a printed document, the leaked emails. These are forgeries. Digital composites assembled to mimic my signature and timestamps. My engineers verified this by reconstructing the cryptographic logs embedded in the original builds. Anyone who doubts it can verify for themselves, right now. I've uploaded every commit, every data trail, every code note to a public archive. Murmurs rippled through the room. I have nothing left to hide, he continued, voice rising. If transparency costs me my job, so be it. But Hearthline will stand. It belongs to the people, not a profit margin. A hand shot up from a reporter. So, you're saying the leak was internal sabotage? Rowan nodded. Yes, and I'll deal with it within the law. Will you name who? His jaw tightened. Not yet, but the truth always outlasts the cold. By the time he returned to the hospital, the surgery wing lights glowed soft and sterile. Leah met him at the elevator, exhaustion etched into her face. He's in recovery, she said quietly. It went well. Rowan sagged with relief. Thank God. She folded her arms. You missed the pre-op. I know. Don't, she interrupted. You're here now. That's enough. They stood together outside the glass window of Micah's room. He was asleep, his chest rising gently, a faint smile tugging at his lips even under anesthesia. He made it through, Leah whispered. So did I, Rowan said. She turned to him. What happens now? He looked at the boy, then at her. Now, I stop reacting to storms and start building shelter before they hit. Her eyes softened. And if the world keeps throwing them, then we weather them together, he said quietly. Hours later, long after visiting hours ended, Rowan sat, alone in the dim hospital chapel. A single candle flickered on the altar, its flame trembling but steady. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the brass snowflake pendant. Whole again, polished smooth from being handled too often. He traced the engraving with his thumb. 47.778 degrees north, 90.004 degrees west. Lake Superior. He whispered to the empty room, Soon, we'll go back there. All three of us. No cameras. No headlines. Just peace. From the hall, he could faintly hear Micah's voice stir in sleep, humming the tune from the gala, the one about finding home through the snow. And for the first time, Rowan realized that home wasn't a place, or a house, or even a company. It was a song that survived the blizzard. A light that stayed on when everything else went dark. The world thawed slowly after the storm, and so did the lives it had changed. 2 weeks later, the snow along Lake Superior melted into patches of silver and slate. The air still held a bite, but the lake moved again, rippling with a rhythm that had once meant everything to Rowan and Leah. It was here, years ago, that they'd exchanged the brass snowflake pendants. And now, for the first time since that night, all three of them stood on that same frozen shore. Micah's wheelchair left narrow tracks in the sand. His legs were still weak, but the surgery had gone well. His braces gleamed under the sun. Leah stood behind him, hands on the handles, wind teasing strands of her hair loose. Rowan stood a few feet away, eyes on the horizon. He looked different now. Tired, yes, but lighter. The sharpness in his expression had softened into something more human. The wind pressed his navy overcoat against him as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the pendant. It gleamed faintly, whole again, its edges smoothed from years of wear. Micah shaded his eyes. So, this is the lake? This is it, Rowan said softly. Where everything started. Leah smiled faintly. And where everything almost ended. Rowan nodded. I came here once after. You left. I sat on the dock and tried to convince myself I didn't care, but I couldn't throw it away. Leah looked down at the pendant around Micah's neck. Neither could I. Micah leaned forward slightly. Mom says you used to come here to think. She's right, Rowan said. When the company was just an idea, I used to come here and dream about saving the world from the cold. I never realized how much colder life could be without the right people in it. The boy smiled shyly. Then maybe it's good you came back. Rowan crouched beside him, picking up a smooth pebble and tossing it toward the lake. It skipped twice before sinking. You know what my dad used to say about skipping stones? What? That every ripple means the world's listening. Micah grinned. Then throw another. He did. And when it sank, the lake accepted it quietly. No judgment, no fanfare, just the soft sound of something finding its place. They sat for a while on the weathered bench by the shore. Leah passed. Around paper cups of hot cocoa, steam rising in curls. You're really stepping down? She asked finally. Rowan nodded. The board votes next week. I'm recommending Eunice Park as acting CEO. Leah blinked. You'd give up everything you built? He smiled faintly. I'm not giving it up. I'm setting it free. The company doesn't need a symbol. It needs a soul. Hearthline's strong enough now to survive without me. Micah tilted his head. What will you do instead? I'm starting something smaller, Rowan said. A non-profit branch, Northlight. It'll connect kids in cold regions with adaptive tech, tutoring, and medical access. No shareholders, no stock price. Just people helping people. Leah exhaled. You're serious? I've never been more serious, he said. I built an empire out of fear of losing control. Now, I just want to build a life that can't be corrupted by it. She looked at him for a long time. You really did change. Rowan smiled. I had a good teacher. Leah raised a brow. Who, me? He shook his head gently. No, him. Micah laughed. I didn't teach you anything. Rowan's voice softened. You taught me how to show up. The boy went quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a folded sheet of paper, creased from being handled too many times. What's that? Leah asked. Micah handed it to Rowan. My song. I changed the ending. Rowan unfolded it carefully. The pencil marks were uneven, but sure. The last verse read, Snow fell quiet over the city of glass. The man who was lost found his way back at last. He said sorry with hands, not words from afar, and the boy forgave him, because love's what we are. Rowan's throat tightened. You wrote this? Micah nodded. It's our song now. Leah's eyes shimmered. He worked on it every night after rehab. Rowan looked out over the lake again, the horizon glowing with late light. Then we'll play it right here someday. You, me, and your mom. Leah's voice was gentle but cautious. You think you can just fit back into our lives like that? No, he said quietly. I think I can earn my way in. She smiled faintly. Then start by helping me push him up the hill. Rowan stood and took the handles of the wheelchair beside her. The two of them guided Micah up the incline together, their boots crunching against the snow-packed ground. At the top of the hill, the three of them paused. The lake stretched out behind them, vast and blue, its ripples catching the fading sunlight. Micah looked over his shoulder. It's pretty. Rowan nodded. It's honest. They stood in silence as gulls circled above the thawing shore. Then Leah reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an old envelope, the letter she had once written and never sent. She held it out to Rowan. It's yours now, she said. He hesitated. Are you sure? She smiled softly. It was always meant for you. He took it, holding it carefully. The paper was fragile, but the ink still legible. He folded it once and placed it back, into his coat. I'll keep it where it belongs, he said, next to the snowflake. Leah looked at him, something like peace in her eyes. You finally learned how to listen to the weather, he smiled. You finally stopped running from it. They both laughed quietly, the sound warm against the cold wind. That night, back in Minneapolis, Hearthline reached a new milestone. Across the city, heated shelters activated automatically as temperatures dipped. The AI system, recoded with the Micah protocol, prioritized calls from low-income zip codes. Ambulances were dispatched to neighborhoods once forgotten by the map. At 11:47 p.m., an automated alert came through the Hearthline dashboard. All warming stations stable. No cold-related injuries reported. Rowan stared at the report in his office, the city lights glowing below him like a constellation of second chances. He took a deep breath, picked up the snowflake pendant from his desk, and whispered, "Warm lights, steady hearts." We did. It, kid, and for the first time in a long time, he believed it. Snow returned to Minneapolis one quiet evening in late February, falling slow and soft, like the city was being tucked beneath a blanket. The storm wasn't fierce this time, just a hush that made everything glow. For once, it felt less like a warning and more like a benediction. Inside the newly renamed Northlight Foundation, a small crowd gathered for a private ceremony. The walls were lined with photographs, warming stations, children bundled in donated coats, rehab units funded by Hearthline grants. At the center stood a single glass case holding the brass snowflake pendant, two halves joined forever, encased in a matte steel frame. The engraving gleamed under soft light. No more halves. Rowan adjusted his tie nervously as the volunteers finished setting up the chairs. The event wasn't for investors or press, it was for families, doctors, and winter aid workers, the people who'd actually used Hearthline. The new CEO, Eunice Park, had insisted he keep the spotlight for one last night. Leah arrived first, a thick scarf wrapped around her neck, cheeks rosy from the cold. Micah wheeled beside her, dressed neatly in a navy cardigan and holding his guitar across his lap. Rowan smiled when he saw them. "You made it." Leah laughed softly. "You think we'd miss the unveiling of your conscience?" He grinned. "It's about time it had an office." Micah rolled forward, eyes wide at the display. "That's our snowflake," he whispered. "It belongs to everyone now," Rowan said gently. "Every family who's ever had to choose between heat and food. Every kid who's waited too long for help. It's their story, too." Leah's eyes softened. "And yours." Rowan looked at her, his voice low. "Ours." The ceremony began with a little fanfare. The lights dimmed, leaving the snowflake gleaming like a lantern in the dark. Rowan stepped up to the microphone, glancing briefly at Micah and Leah in the front row before addressing the audience. "2 months ago," he began, "I learned that truth doesn't just arrive, it survives. Sometimes buried under years of paperwork, sometimes in the heart of a child who refuses to give up on love." He paused, steadying his breath. "Hearthline taught us that technology can warm a city. But it was a boy named Micah who taught me what warmth really means. It's not about heat, it's about presence. About showing up before the storm hits." Micah ducked his head shyly as people turned to look at him. Leah reached over and squeezed his shoulder, pride and emotion blending in her eyes. Rowan continued. "So, tonight, as we dedicate the Hearthline Fund to every child and parent who's ever faced the cold alone, I want to leave you with something simple." He gestured to the display. "For years, this snowflake was split in half. 2 people carried their halves separately, believing they'd lost each other. But storms don't erase. They reveal. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the snow brings what was lost back. Home." The room was silent except for the gentle hum of the building's heat vents. Rowan's voice softened. "There are no more halves now. Not in this family. Not in this city. Not in this company." Applause rose. Soft at first, then swelling until the hall vibrated with warmth. Rowan stepped back, catching Leah's gaze. She smiled. A real one this time. Not polite, not cautious, but full. It felt like forgiveness wrapped in winter light. After the ceremony, the guests lingered around coffee urns and quiet conversations. Outside the glass wall, snow drifted past the city lights. Micah tuned his guitar and began to play the song he'd written, the one he'd sung that night at the gala. Only this time, the melody was stronger, steadier. Snow fell quiet on the city of glass, The lost found home. The hurt looked back. Hands that froze once reached through night, and love came warm as morning light. His voice carried through the hall, soft but sure. People stopped talking. Rowan stood beside him, one hand resting gently on his shoulder as Leah joined the harmony, her voice low and trembling. By the final verse, half the room was wiping away tears. When the last chord faded, Rowan leaned down and whispered, "You did it." Micah looked up with a grin. "No, we did." Later that night, the three of them walked through the city streets together. The storm had slowed to a flurry, flakes catching in Leah's hair and clinging to Micah's gloves. Rowan pushed the wheelchair while Micah held his guitar case across his lap. They stopped at a corner where a new Hearthline heating pod glowed orange under the streetlight. A small sign on the side read, "Funded by the Micah Protocol. Warmth belongs to everyone." A homeless man sat inside, his hands cupped around a steaming paper cup. He looked up, smiled, and nodded. "Bless you, folks," he said softly. Rowan returned the nod, throat tightening. Micah whispered, "That's one of ours?" "Yeah," Rowan said, "one of many." Leah reached over and slipped her arm through Rowan's. "Feels good, doesn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Better than any quarterly report I've ever seen." She laughed quietly. "Guess you're cured of your KPI addiction." He grinned. "Still measuring one thing." "What's that?" "How much warmer this city feels with you both in it." Leah looked away, smiling. "You always were a poet when the snow fell." Micah glanced up at the sky. "It's falling slower tonight." Rowan nodded. "Means the storm's finally resting." As they walked on, the skyline shimmered. Streets lined with glowing Hearthline pods, each one a small ember against the cold. A few blocks away, the foundation building stood bright with new banners that read, "Hearthline, built from love, powered by truth." Rowan stopped for a moment, taking it in. The sight of a city changed not by wealth, but by warmth. Then he turned toward Leah and Micah, voice quiet. "You ready to go home?" Micah yawned. "Home sounds perfect." Leah smiled. "Home finally means the same thing for all of us." And as they walked down the snowy street together, the brass snowflake pendant glinted once under the lamplight. No longer a token of loss, but a promise fulfilled. For the first time in years, there were no more halves left anywhere, only whole hearts, finally warm. A year passed. Minneapolis woke to another deep December, the kind that painted rooftops white and made every breath bloom into fog. Yet, this winter felt different. The city's hum carried warmth through the frost. Hearthline pods glowed at every bus stop. Northlight clinics pulsed with activity, and children's laughter echoed from heated shelters that once stood dark. For the first time in decades, not a single cold-related fatality had been reported in the Twin Cities. And at the heart of it all was a boy with a guitar, a woman who never gave up, and a man who finally learned how to. The Northlight Winter Gala was smaller than last year's, the kind of gathering that didn't need glitz to matter. Volunteers mingled with doctors and social workers. The air smelled of cocoa and pine. Rowan stood near the back, dressed not in his old CEO armor, but in a simple gray coat. No security detail, no press entourage, just quiet pride. He looked up from a stack of thank you letters, drawings from kids in shelters, and saw Leah on stage, preparing to introduce the night's final performance. Her voice carried easily, clear and steady. A year ago, this room was full of questions. Tonight, it's full of answers. The Hearthline. Trust didn't start as an institution. It started as a confession. But it became something bigger because one man decided the truth could change the temperature of the world. She looked toward Rowan then, her eyes soft but sure. This next song is by the boy who changed his father's heart and reminded all of us that warmth isn't made by machines, but by people who choose to stay. Applause rippled through the room. Micah rolled onto the stage, guitar gleaming under the lights. His braces were smaller now, his movements steadier. The crowd quieted as he strummed the first chord, a melody equal parts old and new. Rowan moved closer, standing just inside the shadows of the stage as the boy's voice filled the hall. Once there was snow, and a silence so wide, a man built walls where love used to hide. But the storm found his heart and melted it true. Now the fire that saved him burns, for me and you. The audience leaned in, spellbound. We can light the dark with hands, not fame. We can fix the world by saying its name. And if you're cold, remember this sign. Someone's out there keeping your light in line. When the last note faded, the room rose to its feet. The applause was thunderous, but what filled Rowan's chest wasn't pride, it was peace. Micah grinned down at him from the stage. "Dad, you're crying again." Rowan laughed through tears. "Only because it's warm in here." Later that night, after the guests had gone and the snow began to fall again, Rowan found Leah in the courtyard outside. Strings of golden lights twined through the trees, reflecting off the snow. She stood alone, her breath visible in the cold air, watching the city beyond the glass. He stepped up beside her. "You disappeared after your speech." "I wanted a minute," she said softly, "to remember what quiet felt like before the next year starts." He smiled. "This quiet feels earned." She nodded. "You did more than make amends, Rowan. You changed the system that broke us." He looked down, humble. "We did it together." She turned toward him. "Do you still think about the night of the first gala?" "Every day," he said. "It started as guilt. Now it feels like gratitude." Leah smiled faintly. "You learned how to stay." "And you taught me how," he said. They stood in silence as snow swirled between them, each flake catching the light. Then Leah reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This is from Micah," she said. "He made it in art. Therapy." Rowan opened it carefully. Inside was a miniature version of the brass snowflake, 3D printed whole gleaming faintly in the courtyard light. On the back was a single engraving, "Home." He swallowed hard. "He made this?" Leah nodded. "He said it's for your desk." Wherever that ends up, Rowan smiled, eyes wet. "Guess I'll have to build another office around it." Leah laughed quietly. "Try not to make this one glass and lonely." "Promise," he said. Across the street, through the frosted window of the Hearthline Center, they could see Micah leading a small group of kids through a music session, his guitar on his lap, his laughter spilling out into the cold night. Rowan watched him for a long time. "He's incredible." Leah followed his gaze. "He's your son." He nodded, the words settling warm inside him. "And the best thing I'll ever be part of." She smiled, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "He gets his stubbornness from you, his courage from you." "And the song?" she asked, teasing. Rowan's smile turned thoughtful. "From the storm." They walked home together under the snowfall. No chauffeur, no cameras, just the sound of snow crunching beneath their boots. Micah's voice drifted faintly from the Hearthline Center behind them, carrying his new verse into the winter air. "Even when the night is long, someone's out there humming your song. You just have to listen through the snow. That's how you'll know you're not alone." Leah slipped her hand into Rowan's as they turned the corner. He didn't flinch this time. He simply held on. When they reached the small townhouse that was now their home, Micah's lights were still glowing in the window, warm, steady, alive. Rowan paused on the porch, looking back once at the softly falling snow. It no longer looked like something to conquer. It looked like something that had forgiven him. He whispered, almost to himself, "Thank you for bringing me home." Leah glanced at him. "What?" He smiled. "Just talking to the snow." She laughed quietly. "Then what did it say?" He looked up at the sky, snowflakes landing on his hair. It said, "No more halves." Inside, Micah's guitar strummed again. Gentle, imperfect, perfect. And outside, the city of glass glowed warm beneath the falling snow, proof that sometimes the coldest storms can still lead you home.